How's it going, Yankee fans? Welcome back to Fireside Yankees with Alex and Ryan. A little Saturday morning drop for you guys. No days off for the Fireside Yankees team. And we're looking at Clarke Schmidt today and why he could have a breakout season. 28 years old. Last year, he only pitched like 85 innings, but those 85 innings were pretty freaking encouraging, Ryan. I think we saw some legitimate upside from him to be number three. I would say a solid number three in this rotation. I think that there's a world where he's better than Carlos Rodon this upcoming year. I think there's a world where if he puts together a fully healthy campaign, this is going to be one of the most underrated pitchers that we have. And if you get Roki Sasaki, we talked about this, if the gods will it, we get Roki, you can trade out of your rotation, and a guy like Clarke Schmidt becomes extremely valuable to another team that's looking for controllable pitching. I think they're only paying Clarke like 3.6 million this year in arbitration. Dirt freaking cheap for a pitcher of his caliber when he's healthy is quite exciting. So I'm excited to see what he can accomplish in a full season, a full body of work without any injuries. I think he got injured in like May and then missed 2 months. He didn't return until, or maybe more than that. I don't think he returned until September.
I think it was late. It was that series in Chicago, which I think was at the start of September itself.
Yeah, so he was out for months. We're talking about a guy that was looking like one of our most reliable arms during that first couple of months without Garrett Cole. He stepped up big. So Ryan, we're going to take a look at Clarke Schmidt, his numbers. I know this is your boy, is your dog. We'd love to talk about Clarky. Before we do, how you do today, my friend?
I'm doing excellent, man. And when we look at the pitchers that you can group Clarke Schmidt with, I filtered a table of pitchers with a barrel rate, starting pitchers with a barrel rate at or below 6% this past season, with at least 80 innings pitched, and filtered it to only include starting pitchers. Blake Snell, Chris Sale, Spencer Strider, Paul Skeens, Hunter Green, and Clarke Schmidt. They were the only pitchers in baseball under the qualifications of 80 innings pitched as a starting pitcher to have a swinging strike rate of at least 12% with a barrel rate at or below 6%. So when it comes to missing bats and damage prevention, Clarke Schmidt is up there with two Cy Young winners in Snell and Sale. Three guys that are really up-and-coming stars: Spencer Strider, Paul Skeens, Hunter Green. I'd argue Paul Skeens is the best pitcher in baseball, right there with Tariq Skubal, if you want to say you want someone with a little more of a track record. But he is elite, and I truly mean elite at limiting damage contact and missing bats. This past season, he was awesome in his 16 starts, a 2.85 ERA, a 3.58 FIP. His underlying metrics suggest he was a little bit worse than his ERA, more of a mid-threes ERA pitcher, but Alex, I think you and I would both take a 3.5 or 3.6 ERA over 30 starts from Clarke Schmidt in 2025. His ability to miss bats, again, really improved. His cutter was an excellent weapon for him throughout the season. He had a 116 stuff plus. For those who are unaware as to what stuff plus is, it's a metric that evaluates the quality of your repertoire, your pitch quality, and with a 116 stuff plus, he was up there with guys like Framber Valdez, with guys such as Bryce Miller, Logan Webb, Dylan Cease, Tyler Glasnow, some of the most elite pitchers in the sport. Now, stuff plus isn't everything. Location matters, command matters, and there are times in which Clarke Schmidt's ability to throw strikes is there, but sometimes he leaks a little bit, gets a little bit too aggressive in zone, and leaves pitches over the middle of the plate, and sometimes he just struggles to put guys away. Those are things he's going to have to work on in 2025, consistently putting batters away and finishing counts off so he can have those high strikeout rates. Some of the things that he did last year to really improve in that regard included throwing his sinker a little bit less, his sweeper a little bit more, his cutter attacking with it more aggressively. His cutter, sweeper, and curveball all generated whiff rates of around 30% this past season, and they were all plus pitches for the right-hander. Again, that sinker, it's an interesting pitch for me because it had more whiffs than the average sinker at 20.3%. And does a good job of putting hitters away when he can get called strikes on it. Can he make this a weapon where, he actually threw it more to left-handed batters last year, which is pretty obscure. You rarely see a batter go more aggressive with a sinker than to lefties than he do to righties. I think he's going to have to figure out ways to get that sinker incorporated against right-handed batters who seem to do a lot more damage on it. Now, his sinker doesn't generate as much run as the average sinker. It doesn't have efficient spin, so it has trouble generating movement. I think some of the things he can do are to tweak the location of his his sinker, going more towards the outside part of the plate to right-handed batters and stealing strikes. Those are things you can do when you have a super wide release point, such as Clarke Schmidt. His unique release point really plays a huge role in his ability to have success on the mound. But we know his breaking balls get swings and misses. The cutter was a separating pitch for him this year. It had a 312 WOBA against and a 32.2% whiff rate. Last year, a 22.2% whiff rate and a 338 WOBA. Wasn't nearly as effective. He threw the pitch harder. He was sitting at 92.4 this year compared to 91.3 last year. On the sinker, sat 94.3 compared to 93.4 the year prior. The sweeper, it lost a little bit of velo, but it gained a ton of movement. Clarke Schmidt's going to have to kind of keep his progressions from last year and translate them to 2025, which I think is possible. But the big thing here is staying healthy and staying consistent. If he can be consistent, if he can stay healthy, I think it'll translate into what would be a very productive 2025 season and a year where he can move up in the rotation ranks. You talked about comparing him to Rodon, comparing him to Heel, comparing him to other guys on this staff. You know, he had the best ERA among any pitcher in the rotation last year. When you look at just innings pitch and ERA, 2.85 was better than Fried's, better than Rodon's, better than Cole's, better than Heel's. His 26.3% strikeout rate was only second to Carlos Rodon last year. He has displayed an ability to be a high quality pitcher on a per rate basis. Alex, now it's time for him to do it over 30 starts and be both a guy who can get innings and a guy who can put up pretty strong results.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Clarke Schmidt, in my opinion, you look at his pitch, you kind of just really detailed a lot of his stuff. I don't even know if I have anything more to say about him. It's like, I don't know, you didn't leave me a crumb, Ryan. But I do love his pitch mix, that cutter, sweeper, sinker, knuckle curve. It has so much movement. And, he's kind of the opposite of a guy like Luis Gil, who's just pure velocity, like pure spin rate. Just everything about him is to the extreme. Clarke Schmidt's approach is a lot more calculated, a lot more cerebral, in the way that he's dotting those corners. He's using this pitch mix to his example. He's keeping batters on edge with the movement of his pitches, not necessarily the velocity. He can touch 95 with his sinker, but it's not like, I think he averages 94.2. So, he can dial it up when need be, but most of the time he's using the movement on his pitches and the deception and the tunneling rather than the velocity, which I think actually bodes well for him long term in terms of injury. But, last year he had a right lat strain. It happens. Pitchers these days get hurt. Pitchers in history get hurt. But I think that, bouncing back from that, fortunately, it's not like one of those problems that I think is going to be like lasting for a long time. So I think he should be healthy, ready to go into the 2025 season. Now, the question I have for you, Ryan, is like, what do you think his upside is in this rotation? Because we also love Luis Gil. We also think he is one of those guys that could be, he has the potential to be an ace. He has the potential to be number one, number two long term if he gets that fastball under control, or at least just in the strike zone more frequently. Where do you think Clarke Schmidt fits into this sequence and equation? And also, just a little side mission here. If you do end up getting Roki, which obviously is unlikely, but if by the gods it does happen, is Clarke Schmidt the guy you're starting to think is the one you would try to sell to upgrade your infield? Is that the guy that you would trade out of the rotation for?
I would trade out of the rotation with Luis Gil before I do it with Clarke Schmidt, because I think Clarke Schmidt is a little more of a stable, easier to project kind of pitcher because his command is less volatile. Granted, the upside with Luis Gil is enormous. The upside is that he is a Cy Young caliber pitcher. We've seen that upside. We've seen him look like one of the best pitchers in the sport. It's a question of whether that can sustain. Sometimes guys need that first kind of kick in the butt at the big league level to kind of get acclimated and get things going again. It's a tough call. It's not as simple as I don't want to make myself kind of seem as if I'm this guru who would know exactly which pitcher is going to pitch better than the other guy. I think that you have to have number one, the ability to understand what projects well, strikeouts, command, stuff. If you can combine all those qualities, damage prevention, that'll bode very well for your long-term projections. But I think it's also accepting that there is a lot of volatility and that these are human beings, right? So progression, regression, all on the table here. I think I would pick Schmidt as the guy I'd keep and Gil's the guy I'd trade, but I'd completely understand if the Yankees felt another way about this. And I'd also like to add, Alex, that if the Yankees imported Hiroki Sasaki onto the roster, they would have to have a six-man rotation. So perhaps it would behoove the Yankees to, keep all six of their projected starters, try to move Stroman's money, and at that point, yeah, I'd be very happy with it. Yep, settle for like a Jorge Polanco, whatever, don't care. You have probably the best pitching staff in the world, and you don't want to mess with that to either A, have Marcus Stroman as your sixth starter, B, really hamper your rotation depth. Sasaki is an injury risk. Heel is an injury risk. He's coming off of a career high in innings pitched. Schmidt last year had an injury. Cole last year had an injury. Rodon through the most innings of his career, if you include the regular and postseason. So, these are guys that have been worked more than they have than in previous years. People talk about this with the NBA, where a long playoff run can really hurt a team early in the season. The Yankees had a shorter offseason than they're used to. Carlos Rodon had a whole extra month of time to recover on his body and give his body rest before he hit the 2024 regular season. He will not be afforded that. Same with Schmidt. Same with Heel. Heel he had from the end of the minor league season. So I think he had from mid-September. So there are a lot of guys here who have been pushed further than they've been pushed in previous years. Cole's really the only guy familiar with a shortened workload because he's pitched in the World Series before. So I don't think it would hurt the Yankees at all to keep all six guys, run a six-man rotation, which is what they'd have to do with Sasaki anyways, move Stroman, and then, of course, as I mentioned, go cheap in the infield at that point if you have to. I really wouldn't care. The other thing I'd like to point out in that regard too, Alex, is that when you kind of stock up on so many pitchers, opportunities become available at the deadline. Teams are interesting. You cannot control what teams do. You cannot control who teams sell, if they're willing to trade with you, all that stuff. But it also means that other teams can't control that as well. The Boston Red Sox can't make a team want one of their players more than ours. And what we would have is a surplus, perhaps, of young, controllable pitching. Maybe Will Warren has a strong minor league season or gets reps in the bullpen and becomes highly attractive to a team in desperate need of controllable pitching. Perhaps Clayton Beeter has a big season. Perhaps the Yankees have a surplus of relievers and are able to move someone like Jake Cousins or Ian Hamilton, which I still think is possible in the winter itself. You want to have a surplus. Surpluses are depth. Depth is great. Depth wins you titles. Depth wins you lots of games in the regular season as well. There's no such thing as having too much talent. You can never have too much pitching. It's probably the most injury-prone position in baseball. It's the one position where you could throw one pitch and lose your entire season. In Major League Baseball, I guess you could get hit with a pitch, and that happens, but getting hit by a pitch is extremely rare. ACL tears are extremely rare. Those are not the things that you necessarily see as often as UCL tears. So, I think my answer maybe is a unique one. I would keep all six. If I had to trade between Heel and Schmidt, I would trade Luis Heel, but again, I'm not too firm on that because I do recognize the upside there. So, complicated answer, but I feel like I wanted to emphasize that, it's not as cut and dry, perhaps, as just like, this is the answer, this is what they should do, blah, blah, blah,
Absolutely. I mean, there is no real right answer because every prospect or every player is going to demand a different, type of haul. So, there's no like this one player fits all. So I do think, you have to gauge what the actual talent is you're looking to acquire. But in this instance, I wrote this morning that I truly believe the Yankees have a chance to situate, at least in our recent history, one of the best rotations that we've seen in a really long time. Getting Roki would really cement, this might be a generational rotation that we have piecing together right now, at least for the next couple years, maybe a year or two as Garrett Cole starts to hit that age wall. But I still think he's capable of bouncing back and having a great performance. Like his work ethic, obviously his health has been impeccable throughout his career. So, at this point in time, even without Roki, this is one of the best pitching rotations that the Yankees have had in a long time, Ryan. I mean, can you recall another rotation with this much upside? Maybe they're not as proven in some ways, but with this much legitimate upside, whether it is with Luis Heel coming off the AL Rookie of the Year award, whether it's Clarke Schmidt, who looked great before the injury, whether it's Carlos Rodon, who we're going to do a full breakdown on at some point this offseason on his underlying metrics. Like, he bounced back pretty nicely from the 2023 season, which was injury riddled, in terms of just what his velocity looked like. His slider was phenomenal. Like, if you look at the slider, it was fantastic. It's just his fastball. And you've mentioned the changeup and how he kind of getting that into the mix here. And what do you think about that? I mean, I think the rotation, this is one of the better units in terms of upside that we've had in a very long time, and you need that to win championships. Especially you go into the playoffs with a 3-man rotation, and you can move some of these starters into bullpen roles.
I think you make an excellent point in terms of upside and depth. I think that last year's rotation was certainly a good rotation, but they lacked a couple of things. I don't mean to be like the kind of guy where I talk about the Yankees and try to really poo-poo on what they do. But last year's rotation was good, not great, if that makes sense. They were 13th in Fangraphs wins above replacement. Home runs, they allowed way too many home runs. Last year, a 1.20 home runs per nine. I know that was 15th in the league, but that's still a lot higher than I would like for my rotation. I'd like them to be closer to the bottom, especially considering they weren't one of the best strikeout rotations in baseball. They were 5th in strikeouts per nine, which, is a good metric. But in terms of strikeout to walk percentage, 15.3%, that's 9th, right? Their strikeout to walk rates were good, not great. And their home run prevention was average, right? I want them to be elite at one of those things and average at the other, preferably elite at strikeout to walk rates, and then round league average in terms of home run per nine. If they can do that, I think they'd be a better group. In terms of starting pitching, ERA minus is a metric that takes into account your ERA and it factors in for your ballpark. They were 10th at 96. That means that they were, the 10th best rotation in terms of run prevention, which is good. That's 2 thumbs up. And also volume-wise, I felt like the Yankees got a decent amount of volume for rotation. They were 9th in innings pitched from their starting 5, or not their starting 5, just 5 guys, but their rotation. Those are good. That's good. Awesome. But it's not dominant, right? We're not talking about, top 3 in ERA, top 3 in WAR, top 3 in strikeout rate, top 3 in walk rate. But I want to be in that top 3 range, which I think this rotation has certainly the potential to do. It again comes down to, we saw Clarke Schmidt in his first year as a starter. Alex, he wasn't horrendous, but he started out horrendous, and he wasn't good either. He wasn't good in his first year. Can Luis Gil take that leap? Can Luis Gil, all right, I've banked in my first year as a starter. Let me get better next year at the run prevention, or let me get better at my strikeout to walk rates, which I certainly think is possible. This is a guy who has a very unique mix. Schmidt is a very different look to Gil. It's not like these are two guys where they're extremely similar. They're carbon copies of each other. Cole is different from Gil and Schmidt. I know people are going to say, well, he's got a big fastball like Gil's, but his fastball is different than Gil's. His pitch diversity is different. Gil's a big changeup guy. Cole's changeup isn't a big part of his arsenal. Cole is more of a gyro slider guy. Gil has more of a sweeping slider. Cole has a cutter and a sinker. Gil doesn't feature either of those pitches. Rodon is a left-handed pitcher, and so is Fried, but they couldn't be more polar opposites. Fried specializes in pitch diversity and damage prevention. Rodon's going to kind of go at you with a big fastball and a big slider and big pitches and, big emotion guy. Fried's kind of this calm, cool, collected, almost scarily collected. It's a little bit freaky how calm or emotionless he is, which I like. These are all very different pitchers, and I think pitch diversity, uniqueness in your rotation, I think they've gotten that down. It's a question of health, obviously. Spring training is when we see the most injuries. Last year was Garrett Cole. 2023, it was a slew of injuries from Severino to Rodon. Those two guys getting hurt really put a dent, and Cortez as well, put a dent in their rotation plans. In 2022, I'm not sure they lost anyone that year. And I think in 21, I'm not sure if they lost anybody there. I think they lost Schmidt, but he wasn't, projected to make the rotation. So, it's a dice roll. You never really know who's going to get hurt or healthy. You can't really, even if your preparation's great, you can still get hurt doing that. Guys get amped up in spring training. Things happen. But overall, Alex, I'd have to agree. The upside here is that these guys are, again, top 5 in strikeouts. They're better in terms of limiting the home run ball because Schmidt was better at it last year. Cole was good at it last year. Fried's elite at it. That's 3 of your 5 guys. Can Gil get a little better at it? Can Rodon get just a little bit? Not a lot better, just a little bit. You subtract Stroman starts from the rotation potentially. Again, if you were able to add Roki Sasaki, good God, right? Now, the question I have for you, Alex, if there's one guy in this rotation, one guy that you're going to say, all right, not it doesn't have to be Schmidt, doesn't have to even be one of the top 2 guys in Cole or Fried. Who's the guy you're paying attention to most in spring training? It doesn't have to be that they're going to be the best guy in the rotation, they're going to take the biggest step forward, but whose performance are you going to be playing, or who are you going to be paying the closest attention to in spring training as you watch this projected start at 5 for now going into the spring?
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna spin it a little bit, and it's not gonna be a part of the projected 5, and it's gonna be Will Bourne, because the reason I'm interested in Will Bourne, because we're gonna trade Marcus Stroman. In this instance, we don't get Roki Sasaki, and this is why the interest will kind of flow towards this direction. But if you trade Marcus Stroman, you want to have, we know what Carlos Rodon can be. We know what Garrett Cole is. We know what Max Fried is. We know what Luis Gil can do. We've seen glimpses of Clarke Schmidt. We all know what the potential looks like. but I have no idea what Will Warren's potential can be. I have no idea what his ceiling is. We've saw his floor. You know what I mean? That's the most interesting to me, is the unknown. So if I'm a fan, and we're going to be talking about him plenty on this podcast as things materialize, and you trade Stroman, you're trading Stroman with the intention of Will Warren playing a role in 2025. And the reason that is because he's got a little bit of MLB experience and the Yankees like him. His stuff, it's middling. There's some really good pitches there. There's some upside. But most of all, we saw him start to kind of settle in as he was getting a little bit more action. Yeah, the ERA is scary, but guys, he pitched 20 innings. I'm not labeling him a bust or anything of the sort in a 20-inning sample. I need to see a lot more, and we will see a lot more of Will Warren. So I'm most interested to see if he starts to take those steps forward, if he starts to show better command, even to upticks in velocity, building confidence and sustainability. That's where I'm curious to see, because when an injury happens, and guys, it's baseball. We're going to lose a starting pitcher at some point for whatever amount of time. It's going to happen. Will Warren is going to be the next man up, and can he fill that gap? Can he step in and rise to the occasion, Ryan? So not part of my starting five, but I think it's an interesting one, because eventually we're going to see Will Warren, and he may pitch 40, 50 innings for this team next year.
I love that pick because I 100% agree. And Will Warren, I want to just put this out here now, and I think it's a great time to talk about Will Warren when you talk about Clarke Schmidt, because Clarke Schmidt sucked when he was first a starting pitcher. He was a terrible starting pitcher. 2023 looked like, he looked like he didn't belong, Alex. I remember people like, you're an idiot for thinking he could be a starter, trade him, sell high on him, he sucks. And what happened? The New York Yankees, they were patient, they waited on him, and he ended up being a really big part of the rotation this past season. Development takes time. Progression isn't always linear. Getting knocked down the big league level can be important for pitchers. Now, if I had to throw my hat into the ring here, from the projected 5, I'm going to say Luis Seal, see if he did anything different this year. I'm not saying I'm going to look at the results, more so just the pitch mix and the velocity. And the second guy I'm going to give you, and this is another obscure pick here, I'm going to go with JT Brubacher, who the Yankees picked up in a trade last season. Didn't pitch the major league level, was able to get healthy towards the end of the year after having some setbacks, not with his elbow in terms of recovering from Tommy John. It was with his calf. It was kind of a weird, freak accident. On the field, he developed a sweeping slider. It is a very unique sweeping slider. He has the sinker. He has the upside in mind. He paints the front side sinker to left-handed batters better than I've seen any right-handed pitcher do so. He's got plus command. He's got a repertoire that's interesting. The Yankees turned Luke Weaver, who was the worst pitcher in baseball from 2022-2023, into, one of the best relievers in the game. Someone who I would put in the top 10 conversation at the reliever position. Can they turn Brubacher into a nice little weapon for them? Whether it's, I'm not saying a top 10 reliever, but even if he's a 3.5, 3.6 ERA guy who can spot start and be a reliever for you, that's 2 thumbs up, Alex. That'd be a 2 thumbs up outcome. So I'm paying attention to him this spring training. I know that's still a few weeks away, but it feels like when you say it's so far away, after each episode, we're getting a little closer. We're like a month away from pitchers and catchers reporting. So it's an exciting time. But overall, I feel good about the health of this rotation right now. Again, if you get Sasaki, oh my God, right? It's like that Leonardo DiCaprio gift where he's just biting at his finger. You just can't even, right? Dude, right? It would be so good. It'd be so freaking good. Now, again, more likely, I think he goes to the Dodgers, but you never really know. The last point I'd like to make, and I wanted to pass it off to you like this, it's cool that we're talking about guys who are internally developed, right? Guys who have come through the system. I know the Yankees have spent a lot in the rotation. Cole, Fried, Rodon, but I'd say in Cole's case, more than worth the investment. And you can never have too much pitching because when guys get hurt, opportunities are going to open up. If a guy gets Tommy John surgery, you're going to need a guy for a year. That's where Will Warren can step up. Can he do a job? And then you go, well, what if he's good? Then what are you going to do? You make it work. You make things work. Guys get hurt all the time. The Yankees have built a pitching staff where they have maybe too many pitchers. And that's good because injuries will shrink that number down. It's like last year when everyone was like, what are they going to do when Cole comes back? Schmidt's elbow is going to explode. That's what happened. No, not elbow. His shoulder. I'm not saying we want that to. I'm saying that's what ended up happening. His shoulder gave out on him. He missed 3 months. Boom. Your rotation suddenly has room for Garrett Cole. That's how this works, man. That's how baseball is. It's never, wow, we have so many starters. Nobody ever gets hurt. It's, shit, we just lost the guy's elbow exploded. His knee's not working. He's got a calf strain. Happens all the time. Got to be equipped for that. The Yankees, they're about as equipped for it as any team in Major League Baseball right now. And I think that too is why they shouldn't just dump Stroman to save like $2 million. Unless I get significant financial relief, I'll keep a 6 starter who's a veteran and has proven to be, a passable big league starter. I want as much depth as possible. You can never have too much pitching. So that's my last note on this episode.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid take. I think you're not just getting rid of Stroman to get rid of Stroman. Like, you're getting rid of Stroman because you're going to get 10 mil to spend elsewhere. Like, you're not, 2 million is not going to move the needle for you. That 140 innings is really valuable. Even if he's going to give you a 4 ERA for a number 6 pitcher that's really just supplementing, that's a good deal. You know what I mean? So I do think, if you're not saving a lot of money, there's no point. If we're not going to, it's basically just like cutting him at that point. And why would you do that? So I kind of feel as though I'm in agreement with you if they can get a nice chunk of change back. And I think they might be able to at some point. We'll see how things materialize moving forward. Got you guys updated, obviously, on that if things start to gain momentum. But for now, the starting 5, really, really encouraged, really excited about Clarke Schmidt this year. Really, really good player, just needs to stay healthy. The stuff is there. Just consistency is the next kind of page in the book. But guys, always happy to hear your thoughts down below in the YouTube comment section. Make sure you drop a 5-star on Apple and Spotify. As always, like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.
Perfect.